So what you're trying to do when you're trying to fill in for a drum kit is you're trying to cover at least the three main elements of a drum kit. And the three basic elements are the kick. Now you won't be able to hear this, but because it's an electronic kit, but that makes the sound doof. So that low bass kick. Doof, 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 doof. That's the one that we're trying to learn with our wrist, landing our wrist on the soundboard. Doof. The two other elements of a drum kit that will be practical are your hi-hats. So that's the one over here. And then the third one is the snare. And it's about developing the ability to mimic those three sounds. So you just have to learn them separately, basically, how to do each one. So you're going doof, doof, doof with this part of your wrist. And you're going simulating that high pitch S kind of a sound. And the closest we can do on that with uke is chucking. So chucking a uke, like, particularly if you aim for the strings 1 and 2. So that's kind of close to a. And then we have the third part, the snare. Now, most people, like the one that you've learned with the nail flick, where you flick the soundboard, like the. What that is generally trying to copy, it sounds a little bit like a snare hit, like a, but what it really sounds more like is a thing called a rim shot. And a rim shot is when you put the drumstick on an acoustic drum, and on an acoustic drum it has a steel rim all the way around, and when you do this, you put your stick sideways and you go, and it's really the sound is coming from the drumstick, so it's got this wooden sound. And a lot of drummers use that when they're playing kind of gentle stuff. So they'll be like they'll have that kind of a sound. Yeah, so that's probably as close as you're going to get with that snare sound on a uke, flicking the body. It has that same wooden knock sound. So if you take each three elements and how we execute them on the uke, number one is to. So you're trying to hit this part of your wrist. That is really overexposed. Let me fix that. Okay, so taking that part of your wrist. And there's a lot, people use all kinds of different ways to make this sound on uke when they're playing percussively. I will target kind of here, because that's where I need to have access to the strings. So that's a good spot for me. I notice that when I use a slightly higher part on my wrist, kind of like my forearm, my under forearm, I get a thud. And that's closer to the drum kick than some other places. So it's just a case of finding it on your uke, move it around, try different places. Some people go here, some people go here. A common one is to actually aim for the saddle. Now there's advantages and disadvantages to that. Acoustically, that's not really going to give you much of a thud. As close as you're going to get is using the palm of your hand on the saddle. Just the middle of your hand on the saddle. Acoustically, that'll give you a bit of a thud, but really what that one is for when you're lined into an amp. When you're running through an amp, the way that the instrument exchanges or transfers the acoustic sound into an electronic sound is through a piezo pickup system, which is underneath that saddle. So what you're doing when you're hitting it is you're completely kind of overloading it, and it just gives this sound. Kind of like if you've ever heard somebody bump into a microphone, a sound. And when you do that on a uke that has a pickup, you're kind of overloading the pickup and you're creating this sound. Now some people use that for their percussive playing. Over time it kind of can like wear out a pickup, so you might have to kind of replace it. If you do a lot of percussive playing, you might have to replace it at some point. You might break it, but they're not a big deal to replace. So it can be done. So if you're playing through an amplifier all the time, then this sound will give you a good kick. If you're playing it acoustically and you want an acoustic one, I would use my wrist on the soundboard. Right, so those are the two ways to do a kick. The two best ways anyway that I would recommend. And just get used to that. Using it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And just get some control over it. Then we can start to use our little hi-hats. So our little hi-hats are the chucks. And then the third element would be the snare. So you've already got a bit of this. Now you don't have to go crazy with it. Yeah, just try a few different places around the uke and see what sounds best. So you're looking for kind of a sound. So I get it around here on my uke. Some people prefer up here. Some people actually do taps down the bottom on the rim. And yeah, there's all kinds of different ways to do this. There's thousands of ways really, but these are the ones I would just get started with. Kick, hat, snare, hat. That is what in beatboxing is called the boots and cats. So it does what it says on the tin, boots in cats. They're the sounds that you're trying to create. It's a very simple drum loop. It's one of the first things people learn to beatbox. And the idea would be boot, tss, or boots in cats. Cats. So boots in cats. Boots in cats. Boots and cats. Boots and cats. So it's basically kick, hat, snare, hat. Kick, hat, snare, hat. Over and over. Boots, 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 boots. Lots and lots of times until it's a thing that you're familiar with and comfortable with. Now take your time on it. Make sure to learn each individual technique first, and then just do it very, very slowly, moving between the two, or between the three, I mean. Boo, tss, k, tss. So kick, hat, snare, hat. Kick, hat, snare, hat. Kick, hat, snare, hat. Kick, hat, snare, hat. So it's more important to be consistent than fast. So just get it consistent. Boo, oh, sorry, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Or you can go up if you want. So kick, hat, snare, hat. Kick, hat, snare, hat. Now that's just doing percussive stuff on its own. But if you want to start to play at the same time, so doing two jobs at once, then you're going to have to work on kind of another set of skills that are just a little bit more complicated, and they take a bit of work. but they're all built on those three elements that we worked on there. So things like this. So what I'm doing there is two things at once. I'm doing my kick, but I'm hitting the uke strings at the same time. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of thing, learning to do two things at once. But you just take one at first. So get all of your elements of your drum kit first. Get really comfortable on them. Then you can start to figure out stuff like this. How to hit the strings while doing a kick at the same time. Or picking a string. Like... stuff like that. And that way you can develop control, like you can start to pick and things like that. If you're doing your snare, how to hit the strings at the same time. Like I'm using my thumb, the side of my thumb, to hit the strings. That kind of stuff. It takes time. Percussive playing, when you're playing chords and melody at the same time, that's difficult. There's a reason everybody is kind of impressed by it. It's hard. So don't expect to kind of nail it in a short period of time. Give yourself lots and lots of time. So say I'm going to get this in like a month. I'm going to do kind of 10 minutes practice every day. And if you can stick to it, you'll notice yourself get better after a few days. It'll stop sounding like one individual thing, and it'll start to sound a bit more like a drum kit. And eventually you can get to the point where you're able to play that kind of James Hill style stuff, like I can't remember how this riff goes. I can't remember it. I'm just trying to remember it from years ago, but so that's doing three things. It's playing a bass line, and it's doing the stabs, and it's doing boots and cats. Boots. And stacking them all up together gives you it's years since I've done this one. I need to cut my nails too. Yeah, hopefully that was of some use anyway. It was a good refresher for me. And the camera's down there. Keep on uking, keep practicing, you're doing great, and keep your channel going. I'll try to give you shares every time you stick up a video. And yeah, thanks for getting in touch. Keep going, you're doing great. Talk to you soon.